Hello everyone. Welcome to the second session of this Unix programming. Yesterday we have discussed about the history of Unix and some features, like the things we have discussed. And today we will going to discuss about the architecture of Unix, or sometimes it is also called as the components of Unix. And also we will discuss about the file system of Unix. Right. Let's go with the architecture of Unix. As shown in the figure, this architecture has several layers. So user will interact with the shell with interact with the kernel with the help of tools and applications, and in turn the kernel will interact with the hardware. So user will interact with the hardware, and he will use the hardware to do some tasks. So this is the architecture of Unix, the basic block diagram of the Unix architecture. So this is in this architecture we have majorly want to discuss about two things. Those are shell and kernel, because user, we all know that the user means whoever uses the system is known as the user, and the system which is having some hardware. So as we know that hardware is the main item which implements the tasks whichever the user wants to do. So in this architecture we need to learn about shell and kernel. So let us see what is shell. So in Unix, the shell reads your commands and interprets them as requests to execute a program or programs. So what the shell do is it will receive the commands. So whatever you have, we will give on the shell command prompt, it will receive those commands and interpret them. Hence the shell plays this role. It is also called command interpreter. So whatever the commands you will give, it will interpret them, and accordingly it will reacts. So with the help of this hardware, if you give any command like cp file1 file2, that means we want to copy file1 into file2. So accordingly it receives the cp command, it interprets it, and then executes the task. That means it will copies the file1 into file2. So besides being a command interpreter, the shell is also a programming language. So whatever the programs we want to do in Unix operating system, we need to enter the programs in the command prompt itself, that is in the shell itself. So shell, the programs which are entered on the shell are known as shell scripts. In other languages we call the programs as normal programs, but here we will call it as a shell script. So as a programming language, it permits you to control how and when commands are carried out. So because the shell receives the commands, so how to carry out the commands, how to control the commands, everything it will permits you to do. And shell also acts as an interface between user and the kernel. As shown in the picture, the shell is the interface between the user and the kernel. So as I told earlier, kernel will interact with the hardware. So in turn the user is interacting with the hardware to do the particular task. So this is about a shell. And coming to the kernel, so again we may call kernel as the heart of this architecture. So the kernel is a part of the operating system that interacts directly with the hardware of a computer. So kernel will directly interact with the computer and through device drivers. It is the main point. So the kernel will interact with the hardware through device drivers. So there will be several device drivers will be there. So those device drivers will help the kernel to interact with the hardware, and it provides set of services that can be used by programs, like insulating these programs from the underlying hardware. So it will also provide some set of services that can be used by programs. So in programs there will be something which are useful to do, to write shell scripts. So that role also done by the kernel. The major functions of kernel are to manage computer memory. They will also the kernel is also responsible to control access to the computer, and it is also responsible to maintain file system, to handle interrupts. As we have discussed in the previous class, interrupts, those are like system calls. Those things also be handled by the kernel only. And the kernel is also handle the errors, as discussed in the previous class. it also performs input and output services. So input and output services, what are they means, which allow the computers to interact with the terminals, storage devices and printers. As there are several terminals will be there. Terminal is nothing but a system. So if you are working in a network, so for example, we are working in a computer lab, there will be 60 systems and each system is known as a terminal. So this input and output services means this will allow computers to interact with terminals, storage devices and also printers. And also it is responsible to allocate the resources of the computer. As we are already discussed that we are using multi-user and multitasking systems. There is every chance that users will share the resources like memory, they will share printers and certain things they will share. And uh, the kernel is also responsible, as I told earlier. System calls also the kernel will take care. And system calls, as I told that there are several system calls, 100 system calls are there, and each system call is developed to execute a particular task, such as opening a file or writing to a file or obtaining information about a file or executing a program or terminating a process or changing the priorities or updating the date and time or getting the date and time from the system. These are all the system calls, various system calls, they will be executed. And the execution of the system calls is also responsibility of the kernel itself. So this is nothing but the broad idea about this architecture of Unix and its components. Okay, then we'll move to the next thing is, so this is what I have told in the previous slide. So this is about the kernel. As I told you that kernel is responsible for the computer memory, control of access to the computer, maintaining file systems, handling interrupts, handling errors, performing input output services, allocating the resources of the computer. These are all the functions of the kernel. Then we are going to the next topic, that is Unix file system. So Unix file system, basically this is a very typical concept in Unix. So because Unix has a unique feature, that is, in Unix it will treats each and everything as a file. So if it is a normal file also, it will treat it as a file. If it is a device, that also the Unix treat the device also as a file only. So generally a file is a basic structure used to store information on the Unix system. As a general definition also, a file is nothing but a place where you store information. So similarly or technically you can also define as a file is a sequence of bytes that is stored somewhere on a storage device. So generally whatever the content you will enter into the file is nothing but some sequence of bytes, and generally the file will be stored in some storage area like RAM or ROM or some external device or such that. And the Unix file system provides a logical method for organizing and sorting and retrieving and manipulating an information. So Unix file system will allow us to organize the data, store the data, retrieve the data or manipulate the data. These all we can do with the Unix file system. And a file can store manuscripts and other word processing documents. Like as we are experiencing in Windows, we are having MS Word. In that MS Word you can use some you can store some data, or you can store some images, whatever you want to store you can just store it. So something like that in Unix also we can do the same thing, right? So files are organized in a hierarchical file system. This is the important thing. In Unix, the files are organized in hierarchical file system with files grouped together into directories. So similar files will be kept in a single directory. So now what is the directory? Directory is nothing but a collection of files. So because this is a hierarchical file system, we will call it as a tree type structure, inverted tree type structure. We will have inverted type tree structure we will have in Unix file system. And in Unix there are three different files we'll use, and those are regular files and directory files and special files. And we will discuss one by one what are these files and what are the uses of the each file. And in regular files are also called as ordinary files. So as a user, the information that you work with will be stored as an ordinary file. So whatever you enter or whatever the shell scripts you will develop are all stored in the form of a normal file, ordinary file. And ordinary files can contain normal ASCII characters such as text for programs, or ordinary file can be created, changed, or deleted as you wish. As similarly in Windows, as we can create a Word file, you can delete it, you can modify it, you can whatever you want, you can do that or do with that. Similarly here also a normal file can be created or changed or deleted as you wish. You can do whatever you want with this ordinary files. And coming to the directory files, again, the directory is a file that holds other files and contain information about the locations and attributes of these files. So here the directory is also a file, but this is a special file, like not a special file, it is a directory file. So this directory file contains the list of all files and their attributes. What are attributes? What are the type of the file, what are the is that file is a directory or a file, or it has any special files, or it has any symbolic links. So many other characteristics of files will be stored in that. So for example, if a directory includes a list of all the files and subdirectories that it contains, as well as their addresses, characteristics, and file types. So a directory is also, again, we call a directory is also a file, but in this directory we are having the list of files or any other subdirectories. For example, say for if you have a directory is known as a movie, so in that movie directory you will have again some subdirectories like Telugu movies, English movies, and Tamil movies. So those Telugu, English, and Tamil movies are called subdirectories. And also you may have some files also. Say for example, in movies folder you will have some other short films or something like that. So those short films are called files, and those Telugu, English, and Tamil directories are called subdirectories. So this will be the structure of this directory files. And coming to the special files, so again, as I told earlier, as the Unix treats each and everything as a file, these special files constitute an unusual feature of the Unix file system. That's what I have told you. A special file represents a physical device. Here, any physical device, like for example, if you are using a USB, a pen drive, that's also treated as a file in Unix. That is the unique feature of this special files. It may be a terminal. As I told you, that terminal is nothing but a system. A communication device, any communication device is also a file. Or a storage unit such as a disk drive. A drives, disk drives, or RAMs and ROMs, everything will be treated as a files in Unix. So uh, like normal files, Unix system treats special files just as an ordinary file. That means you can read or write to the devices directly. That means whatever you want to store in that communication device or a memory, you can do that directly, treating that device as a file. um, and the Unix system takes these read and write commands and causes them to activate the hardware connected to the device. So whenever you're reading or writing any device, the Unix system takes these read and write commands and causes them to activate the hardware. So correspondingly the hardware will activate, and the hardware will take care of writing or reading from the physical devices. So these are the special files. And about these files we'll have a detailed information in the coming units also. And this is the hierarchical file structure. It is something, looks like something like this. So here you will see there are different types of files are there, and on the top you will find a directory known as a root directory. So root directory is the parent of all the directories. So whatever the Unix is having in the operating system, all those information will be under this root directory. Is something like it is the head of the family. Root is nothing but the head of the family of the file system. Okay, so there are several directories will be there in Unix file system. We will see one by one what are those and what are the uses. Okay, then first one is root. As I told you, this is root directory of the file system, the main directory of the entire file system. This is the main directory of the entire file system, and the root directory for the super user. So super user means who is the administrator of the system is called the super user. So the super user is responsible to create the sub users. So for example, say if you're working in the computer lab, there will be a system administrator who will give you the your login name and password. So he will create the login names and passwords for our students. So similarly he will becomes the super user. So this root directory is under control of the super user. Okay, then all the remaining directories what we are going to discuss in the class are under will be under this root directory. Then there is a directory named as bin. So bin stands for binary. So we all know that what is binary, and this directory contains all executable files for most of the Unix commands. So as you know that we have thousands or hundreds of commands in Unix, and each command will have some binary information which will be executed while we will use that those commands. So this directory, this bin directory, will have that executable files for most of the Unix commands. Unix commands can be either C programs or shell programs. So because as I told you earlier that Unix is rewritten in C language, or the shell programs also are existing in for some commands. So those commands will be either in C programs or in shell program. Okay, so shell program, don't confuse. Shell program is nothing but again a collection of several Unix commands. So there will be commands will be there. Those with the help of those commands we will write programs. So shell programming or shell scripting is nothing but collection of several Unix commands. Then the next directory is etc directory. So this is the directory that contains the system administration and configuration of databases. So as we will use databases in the Unix operating system, those databases, the information regarding the configurations of the databases and the administration side information will be kept in this etc. So we will not be able to access this directory. Then the next one is device directory. So again this contains the special files that include terminals, printers and storage devices. As I said earlier, because the Unix treats each and everything as a file, so this device directory will hold the information about all the terminals. That means if you are working in a network, so that if the network contains, say for example, 60 systems, so each system will be terminated as a terminal. So there will be designated by TTY, TTY1, TTY2, TTY3, so on. So if you are working in the say for example fifth system, then your terminal number will be TTY5. Similarly, the information about the printers, if you have any printers attached to your network, those information will be stored. If you have any storage devices are there, external storage devices are there, and their information also will be stored in this directory. These files contain device numbers that identify devices to the operating system, including, like for example, say for example a terminal is there, so the terminal will be designated as slash forward slash dev forward slash, say for example tty1. So that indicates that terminal 1 is the number given for the first system. Similarly, if you have two printers, then the printers information will be stored like slash dev slash printer 1. Similarly for printer 2 slash dev slash printer 2. Similarly for all devices will have same some numbers, and those numbers will be used to identify the devices, right? Then the directory lib directory. So this lib directory is nothing but library. So this directory contains all the library functions provided by Unix for programmers. As we have already studied about C language, we are using so many library functions available in C language, like which we use with the star include stdio.h, math.h. These are the functions, library functions, predefined functions. Similarly in Unix also there are some predefined functions, library functions are available. We can use them in the programming. So the programs written under the Unix make use of these library functions in the lib directory. So this directory will contain all the functions, and these functions we can use while we are executing or writing the shell script or shell programming. Then sbin is the another directory. So this directory contains the programs used in booting the system and in the system recovery. So booting of the system, I think you all are aware what is booting. Like whenever you are starting a computer, it will take some time to get the actual screen. So the process behind that, that means while on switching on the system to getting the actual screen, the time between that is called booting. So we'll activate some sort of files to start the system. So that process is known as a booting process. Similarly, whenever the system hangs, we will generally what we do is we will just reset the system. Then also booting is required. So the information, the files required for booting the system will be stored in this sbin directory. Then comes to the next directory, which is opt directory. This is the root for this subtree containing the add-on application packages. So whenever the Unix is using any add-on applications, for example, whenever you buy a system, you will not get say for example Adobe Reader. So Adobe Reader is a package which is used to read the PDF format. So this is an add-on package. Similarly, whenever the Unix system uses some add-on packages, the information about those packages will be stored in this opt directory. So whenever you check the opt directory, you will find the add-on packages which are used by the current system. And then home directory. So this is the home directory. So this contains the home directories and files of all users. Suppose for example, if you are using a network and if you are having a server, and under that server, suppose say for example 60 students are working, so each student will have a separate username. For example, here I have mentioned that MVR is a user. So that then what happens is the programs like sorry uh, if your login name is MVR, your default home directory is /home/MVR. So whenever you are logging with the system with your name, for example, if my name is Kishore, so my directory will be /home/Kishore. So this is the home directory, and where the information about all the users who are accessing the current network will be stored in this directory. So generally what the thing is, whenever you are entering into the system with the use of your login ID and password, you will enter directly into your home directory. There you will create so many directories under this home directory, and you will work with the files in those directories, right? Then temp directory, as the name suggests, that this contains all temporary files used by the Unix system. So whenever you are executing a command or you are writing a shell script, there will be a possibility that you may need some temporary files, and those temporary information and temporary files will be stored in this directory. And then the next one is MNT directory. MNT stands for mount. So mount directory. So this is the directory where the information about the mountable devices. So let us see what is mounting. So generally in Windows, whenever you will use a pen drive, you will just put the pen drive in the USB. Directly the Windows will recognize it, and it will appears on the my computer. So we can access that pen drive with the help of double clicking the mouse. But in Unix, whenever you will insert a pen drive into the system, we need to execute some commands like mount. So mount is a command used to connect the USB to the system. Similarly, whenever you want to disconnect the USB, you need to execute another command, unmount. So unmount is a command used to disconnect the USB from the system. So there are several commands are there to connect the USB to the system. So the things which are connected from outside, like any USB pen drive or any external hard disk, those things should be mounted, and the information about the mounted devices will be stored in this directory, mount directory. And the next one is Unix directory, which is not accessible by any user. This directory contains the Unix kernel programming. So all the programming which is related to the kernel, which is the important and heart of the Unix operating system, will be stored in this Unix directory. Then comes to the user directory. USR is nothing but user. So this contains other accessible directories as user lib and user bin. As we have discussed already, user lib library directory we have seen, and similarly bin directory we have seen. Bin stands for binary, so binary informations. About the system, those are the binary directory stores the information executable files of the Unix command. Here this is somewhat different. Like in this we have some subdirectories like user bin. So user bin contains many executable programs and Unix system utilities. So system utilities means there will be some utilities which similar to the Windows which the Unix also uses. So those programs or utilities, you may call it as, will be stored in this user bin. Similarly, there will be some games. So the information about the binary information about the game programs and data required for the games will be stored in this user games directory. Similarly, user lib contain libraries for programs and programming languages. So whenever you are using other programming languages other than shell scripting, you require some libraries, and those library functions will be stored in this user lib. And user sbin contains executable programs for system administrator, so which is not accessible, only administrator can access this directory. And it will contains the some executable programs which are required for system administration. So then user share man, this is the other directory which contains the online manual packages. As I told you that we have a special feature in Unix that man help option is there in Unix, though. So the information about the help information, all the commands information will be stored in this user share man directory. And where variable, so variable directory again contains uh, directories of all files that vary among systems. So these includes files that log system activity, accounting files, mail files, application packages, backup files, so for editors, and many other type of files that vary from system to system. So generally this variable directory contains all the directories and files which varies from time to time. For example, say for example there is a file which is having the information about all the uh, users who are currently logged in. For example, if you are using a network in our college, and if you are say for example 60 systems are connected to a network, and among the 60 systems, say for example 25 people are using the systems, then if you find how many students are logged in currently, you can find and you can get that information from this variable file directory. So you can be able to how many members are logged in, when they are logged in, and how much time they have spent on the system. The all information we can access from these type of variable files. Similarly, some accounting files will be there. Those information about the accounting files will be stored in this. Similarly, mail files, if suppose if you are sending any mails to the beside or any other terminals to your friends, those information will be also stored in this mail files. And also backup files for editors, so editors need some backup files. So those backups and everything also will be stored in this variable directory, because the backups may vary from time to time. So you may keep on adding some information to the backup files, or keep on adding information to existing files. So because they are varied or variable files, those files will be kept in this variable directory. Again, it consists of several subdirectories, like where admin contains system logging and accounting files. This admin directory will contains the system logging and accounting files. And mail, again, as I said, this variable directory contains those subdirectories, and each subdirectory will is capable of holding some information. Like variable admin directory will holds the logging and accounting files, and variable mail contains the user mail files. And variable news contain messages from common interest, like whenever you are sending whenever you are want to give information to all at once. So mail is different. Mail is you will transfer the information from one terminal to another terminal, or else if you want to give same information to all the users at once, that can also be done. So those type of news will be stored in this variable news. And where opt is the root subtree containing add-on application packages. So whatever the add-on application packages are having, those information will be kept in this variable opt. And temp, as we are aware of that those directories responsible to store the temporary files. Similarly, UUCP. So UUCP system, at this moment we are, you may not be aware of what is UUCP. We will discuss it later. So this directory is capable of holding the UUCP file information. We will discuss later what is UUCP and related items, right? So this is the right. So we came to the end of this session 2. So today we have discussed about two things, that is architecture and then followed by the file system. These are the two important topics in the unit 1, and after this from at least for another 30 35 classes we'll have only commands. So the theory part, the Unix theory part will end here, generally, because from the next class onwards only we will have commands, and we need to concentrate a bit more on commands, because while learning a single command, it will be like very easy thing. So you will feel very easy that you are learning those commands, but the problem is, because we are having so many hundreds of commands are available in Unix, we need to discuss each and everything. So while remembering them is a bit difficult. Once you get that, I mean, like, for example, if there is a command cp command, so you need to remember that what is the use of cp means copy, like that you need to remember. So once you get that recognition of each and every command, definitely you will feel very easy, and you will be able to write Unix shell scripts and everything very easy. So the coming classes we will discuss all the like commands, and every command, what is the syntax of the command, what is the use of the command, and if the command is having any options to use with that, we will also discuss what are the options available and everything. And I suggest all of you that if you are having personal computers or laptops, go for uh, you can install VMware, and also install any of the Unix flavor, Unix or Ubuntu, Fedora, whatever you want, you can install in your laptops and desktops, so that you can practice commands in Unix, because practice makes commands to remember easy. So if you have any personal computers or laptops, you can install dual booting. You can go for dual booting. That means you can use both the Windows and Linux, or else if you feel any problem with dual booting, you can use VMware, and so that you can install Fedora in that, and you can practice. And one more important thing I want to share is, whatever the commands we are going to discuss are all related to Unix. As I said, Unix, from Unix there are several things which are derived, like Fedora, Linux, and these are all the derived flavors of the Unix. So there will be, whenever you are practicing a command, some commands, not all, but 10%, maybe 10% of the commands may not give the actual result. So the result may varies what we are discussing. So that's because we are not discussing about the commands which are advanced. We are discussing all the concepts of Unix operating system only. So it may or may not vary, but if it also it is possible that some of the outputs of the commands will vary what we are discussing in the sessions. So okay, fine. From tomorrow onwards we'll go with the commands. So don't miss the commands sessions, because we will not going to come back again to learn all the commands, because we are having so many so much of syllabus to cover. So we'll not going to come back to the commands again. So for the next 10 to 12 sessions, you better you keep watching the videos and follow. And as I told you earlier, please, if possible, download or install Linux or Fedora or Ubuntu in your personal computers if you have, and practice. Okay, thank you, and I will get back to you tomorrow.